"I'll give you $100,000 if you solve this," the millionaire doubted. But the boy did it in 3 seconds. The moment felt like time itself had stopped. In a glass-walled boardroom overlooking the heart of New York City, surrounded by towering skyscrapers and powerful men in tailored suits, a small, dirt-stained boy sat silently at a glowing computer screen. His fingers hovered for less than a breath, his eyes calm in a place where fear should have lived. What no one knew yet was that this single moment was about to change every life in that room forever. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and miracles that arrive when we least expect them, then take a moment right now to like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel, because stories like this remind us why humanity still matters. The boy's name was Caleb Johnson, and he was 9 years old. His shoes were worn thin at the soles, his shirt patched at the elbow, and his blonde hair looked like it hadn't seen a proper comb in days. He did not belong in that room, yet somehow he had been brought there by fate, exhaustion, and a miracle that began hours earlier on the cold streets outside. Caleb lived with his mother, Grace Johnson, in a shelter on the edge of Brooklyn. His father, a factory worker and church volunteer, had passed away 2 years earlier after a workplace accident. Since then, life had become a daily test of faith. Grace worked 2 cleaning jobs, prayed every night, and still barely managed to put food on the table. Caleb learned early that survival required silence, patience, and an unusual ability to understand things far beyond his age. Old donated computers at the shelter became his escape. While other children played games, Caleb studied patterns, numbers, and logic as if they were a second language written into his soul. That morning, Grace had been cleaning the offices of Whitmore Technologies, one of the largest private tech firms in the United States. The CEO, Daniel Whitmore, was known across the country as a ruthless, self-made millionaire who believed talent was rare and poverty was usually deserved. Faith to him was weakness, kindness was inefficiency, and miracles were fairy tales for people who had failed. While Grace scrubbed floors, Caleb waited quietly in a corner with a notebook filled with scribbles no one had ever tried to understand, when a sudden system failure locked the entire executive floor out of their servers. Panic spread like wildfire. Millions of dollars were bleeding by the minute. Engineers tried everything. Nothing worked. In frustration, someone noticed the boy watching the screen with unusual focus. It was almost insulting, this child observing what the best minds in the building couldn't fix. Daniel Whitmore noticed too, and in a moment driven by arrogance rather than hope, he allowed the boy to approach the workstation. Daniel believed humiliation would prove a point. He loudly promised $100,000 if the child could solve the problem. The executives expected laughter, not resolution. What they got instead was silence. Caleb sat down. His fingers moved once. Just once. 3 seconds passed. The system unlocked. Data flowed back like a heartbeat restarting after death. The room froze. No cheering came. No immediate celebration. Only shock, confusion, and something unfamiliar tightening in Daniel Whitmore's chest. He had built his empire on logic. Yet logic had just betrayed him. The boy didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He simply stood up and looked around as if unsure whether he was allowed to exist there. Engineers rushed to verify the fix. It was flawless, elegant, something even they wouldn't have thought of. The realization spread slowly, painfully, that this child had done in seconds what a room full of $1,000,000 minds could not do in hours. Daniel stared at Caleb and felt something crack. Not his pride, something deeper. A memory. Surfaced of his own childhood, sitting in a church pew beside his mother before success had hardened him. He remembered believing that God saw everyone, even the small ones. The money was transferred, $100,000, the promise honored. But the moment didn't end there. Daniel began asking questions. Not out of curiosity, but confusion. Where did the boy learn this? Who trained him? What school could produce this kind of mind? The answers came quietly and shattered assumptions. A shelter, old computers, a praying mother, no tutors, No privilege, just hunger, grief, and determination. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. For the first time in years, success felt hollow. He replayed the image of Caleb's hands, steady, confident, unafraid. He realized that brilliance had been standing outside his glass towers every day, unseen and ignored. Over the following weeks, Daniel did something unprecedented. He funded a full scholarship for Caleb, established a tech learning program in underfunded shelters across New York, and quietly began attending church again, sitting in the back, unsure if he was still welcome. Caleb's life transformed, but not overnight. He struggled with classrooms that didn't understand him, children who judged him, and a world that suddenly expected greatness instead of survival. Yet through it all, grace reminded him of the same lesson his father had taught him before he died, that gifts were not given to elevate us above others, but to lift others up. Years passed. Caleb grew into a young man whose humility matched his brilliance. He returned often to the shelters, teaching children who reminded him of himself. He spoke about faith not as a weakness, but as a foundation. And Daniel Whitmore, once the man who doubted, became the quiet supporter who never again underestimated the power of a single moment of belief. Just before the story ends, I want to ask you something important. If this journey moved you, if Caleb's story reminded you that talent can come from anywhere and that kindness can change destinies, please comment below with a single word, hope. Your comment helps this story reach others who need it. On the day Caleb graduated college, Daniel attended silently, sitting beside Grace. When Caleb crossed the stage, he didn't look at the crowd. He looked at the two people who believed in him when the world didn't, and in that moment, the miracle was complete, not because of intelligence, money, or success, but because doubt had finally been replaced with faith. If this story touched your heart even a little, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your engagement helps stories like this live on, reminding the world that sometimes the smallest hands hold the greatest answers. Success did not arrive in Caleb Johnson's life like fireworks or applause. It arrived quietly, carrying responsibility heavier than anything he had known as a child. The scholarship, the recognition, the doors that opened, none of them erased the memories of cold nights, empty refrigerators, or the fear in his mother's eyes when bills piled higher than hope. Those memories stayed with him, shaping every decision he made as he stepped into a world that suddenly expected greatness from a boy who once expected nothing. College was another battlefield. Caleb entered one of the top universities in the United States, surrounded by students who had grown up with private tutors, stable homes, and confidence passed down like an inheritance. He felt out of place, not because he lacked intelligence, but because he carried a past most of them could not imagine. While others complained about workload, Caleb worked part-time to help his mother move out of the shelter. While others chased prestige, he chased purpose. Daniel Whitmore watched from a distance. He never tried to claim credit for Caleb's success, never appeared in interviews, never asked for gratitude. Yet the boy's journey forced Daniel to confront his own legacy. For years, he had measured success in profits and acquisitions, believing that the strongest deserved to rise and the weak were simply unprepared. Now he saw how wrong that belief had been. Strength, he learned, was often born in suffering, not comfort. As Caleb advanced in his studies, he began volunteering in community centers, churches, and shelters, places that reminded him of where his story truly began. Children gathered around him, not because they understood his brilliance, but because they felt seen by someone who had once stood exactly where they stood. He taught them logic and technology, but more importantly, he taught them that their circumstances were not their destiny. Grace Johnson watched her son become a man with quiet pride. Every night, she still prayed the same prayer she had whispered when Caleb was small, that God would protect his heart from arrogance and his mind from despair. She worried not about his future, but about the weight the world would place on him once it realized what he represented, proof that opportunity, not superiority, creates greatness. The media eventually found Caleb. Headlines praised him as a prodigy, a miracle child, a once-in-a-generation mind. But the stories always felt incomplete. They spoke of talent, never of faith, of intelligence, never of sacrifice, of success, never of the nights when a boy learned to be strong because he had no other choice. Caleb refused most interviews. When he did speak, he redirected attention to the children still waiting for someone to believe in them. Daniel's company, Whitmore Technologies, changed as well. Quietly at first, then unmistakably. Internship programs opened for underprivileged youth. Scholarships expanded. Recruitment shifted from elite schools to overlooked communities. The board resisted at first, questioning profitability. Daniel stood firm. For the first time in his career, he wasn't chasing growth. He was correcting a mistake that had lasted a lifetime. Years later, at a national technology conference in Washington, D.C., Caleb was invited to speak. He stood on a massive stage, lights blinding, audience silent. Among them sat Daniel Whitmore, Grace Johnson, pastors, teachers, engineers, and children watching from live streams in shelters across the country. Caleb spoke not of code or systems, but of moments. Moments when someone chooses to doubt or choose to believe. He reminded them that the world is full of unlocked doors that no one bothers to open because they assume nothing valuable is behind them. He spoke of a boardroom where arrogance made a bet and humility fulfilled it. And he ended with a truth that silenced the room, that intelligence without compassion is empty, and success without purpose is failure in disguise. That speech changed policies, funding priorities, and lives far beyond that room. Donations poured into education programs, churches partnered with tech firms, mentorship networks formed, all because one child had been given 3 seconds to prove his worth. But the most powerful moment came later, away from cameras. A young boy approached Caleb after the event, hands shaking, eyes filled with the same uncertainty Caleb once carried. He didn't ask for money or fame. He asked a simple question, whether someone like him could ever belong in a world that felt so far away. Caleb knelt down, placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, and smiled with the quiet confidence of someone who already knew the answer. If this continuation of the story is reaching your heart, if it reminds you that belief can outlive doubt and faith can outgrow fear, please take a moment now to like this video, share it, and stay connected to the channel. Stories like this live longer when you help carry them forward. Caleb never forgot that everything began with a challenge meant to embarrass him. $100,000 had changed his circumstances, but belief had changed his destiny. Daniel Whitmore never forgot either. In the final years of his career, he often said that the greatest return on investment he ever made was not a company or a product, but trusting a boy the world had ignored. Just before this story ends, I want to make a special request. If this journey inspired you, strengthened your faith in humanity, or reminded you that miracles still exist in ordinary places, please comment "I believe" below. Your words may be the encouragement someone else desperately needs, because sometimes the world doesn't change when power speaks loudly. It changes when a quiet child is finally given a chance, and someone listens.